Hello. Today I will be finally featuring a list that many have been requesting, and that is of course my list of recommended and not recommended ships for the upcoming Tier 6 ranked season. Now, the Tier 6 ranked season is going to be quite different than the Tier 7 in the sense that there are not quite as extreme differences as they were at Tier 7. For example, at Tier 7, the carrier difference was massive. If you had a Saipan versus a Ranger, the Saipan completely wrecks the Ranger regardless of what setup you're using. And for example, the Belfast was so stupidly overpowered and so incredibly much better than, for example, something like a Pensacola or a Shores or whatever, that there were these massive differences of ships that were very likely to lose you the game compared to ships that were very likely to win you the game. In fact, I consider Tier 7 ranked, the last season of ranked, to be one of the worst seasons of ranked in this game ever because of these massive imbalances between ships. And now, starting off here though, I'll start off with the battleships as I usually tend to do, and as I said just now in the forward, there's not those kind of massive really differences in Tier 6. Yes, there are ships that are better or worse than the others, but the differences aren't that huge. I'll start off with battleships because in my opinion there's really no such thing as a bad Tier 6 battleship. I think you can probably reach rank 1 playing pretty much any battleship you want. If I had to pick though, if I had to categorize these ships in terms of ships that I consider that will be strong, very strong, well, starting off we have the Warspite. Let me see if I can find my Warspite. Warspite, even though it's painfully slow, it handles great. You can get some good concealment on it. And, well, first of all, I should probably say a word of my expected meta. That's probably very important. When I rate these ships, I'm rating them from ranks 10. I'm rating them for the kind of gameplay I expect at ranks 10 to 5 or 5 to 1. Between ranks 23, I think you start at 23 to 10. I don't think it really matters what ship you play. In all these ranked seasons, I've played on various different accounts, and I have had no issues really carrying games at these ranks by playing just any ship, any random ship. It hasn't mattered. Like last season, I carried with York and Pensacola's at these ranks. So before rank 10, I think what's more important is how you play your ship and not what ship you're actually playing. Keep that in mind when I rate these ships. This is for the more basically for the better level of gameplay that usually arrives at rank rank 10 to 5. At least at the start of the season. Towards the end of the season, 10 to 5 tends to become pretty watered down since a lot of people who don't have the best win rates tend to reach it, but mostly probably 5 to 1. Basically, the ranks where you will spend the most of your time if you're going for rank 1. Now, starting off though, I expect the meta to be heavily smoke focused. Every season has been heavily smoke focused. Last season, or well, the previous seasons, there has at least been some ways to break up the smoke in the terms of in the form of radar. And even though I absolutely hated the Belfast because it was so stupidly overpowered, it did bring with it radar, which tended to break up the monotony of the constant smoke camping. If only it didn't have a smoke itself, which kind of, while it helped break up the meta, it also added to it in return. But there's of course no radar available at Tier 6. So at Tier 6 there's going to be a lot of smoke camping, especially in the lower tiers. Of course, as I said, 23 to 10, people won't understand to use smokes and DDs won't be smoking you up and you won't be seeing this kind of team play. But in the higher ranks, of course, that's where when we'll really start to see the smoke meta shine, and it's for that smoke meta that I am making this commentary for what I expect for the higher ranks of play. Starting off, Warspite. As I said, terrible speed, god-awful anti-air, well, yeah, pretty much god-awful anti-air, but it has fantastic guns. Great penetration, great accuracy. Yes, the guns are slow, and yes, the turret traverse, well, it's been buffed, but the turret traverse is also pretty damn slow, but these guns can punish any ship. and that includes any angled battleship at tier 6. It doesn't matter if they point bow in like this. If you see for example a Dunkirk, then the Warspite will eat the Dunkirk completely alive, because well, you can just shoot straight at the nose and get 15k volleys on the Dunkirk, which will melt it extremely quickly. And considering I am expecting a lot of this smoke camping type of play, the great maneuverability, great agility I would say, combined with the great accuracy and the very punishing salvos, means that the Warspite will do extremely well. Of course, the weaknesses of any slow ship like the Warspite is there's going to be a lot of IFHE spam, a lot of HE spam and a lot of IFHE spam, and that slow battleships are especially vulnerable to that. But provided we have the smoke cover, then the Warspite should do extremely well. And for that reason, I also expect the Arizona to do extremely well. The Arizona, unlike the New Mexico, has significantly more accurate guns. It's also very slow, so same weakness, being caught by HE spam. But once again, a very, very punishing broadside, very accurate guns. And well, anytime you spot anything when you're sitting in your smoke, of course, this will be very punishing. So I expect that these two ships to do very well. Following that up, my personal favorite is of course going to be the Fuso. The Fuso doesn't have the same accuracy, but in return it makes up for by having 12 guns, and it has a very fast reload of 28 seconds on these guns, and the amount of shell power you can just pump out in this ship is pretty damn impressive. It's slightly faster, not large enough to make a difference. It doesn't have the great concealment these other two have, but it's a very, very strong ship, and the complete lack of superstructure it has means that it's less vulnerable to eating just as much damage. I mean, don't get me wrong, it will still eat damage, but the difference here is that it has 35mm deck, which means that IFHE from Cleveland and such cannot penetrate this deck, whereas for example on ships like the Arizona, 25mm, it's gonna do massive damage. Warspite, 25mm, it's going to do massive damage. So this is of course the reason why Fuso in general, it has no superstructure and it has this additional armor, which means that IFHE is significantly less punishing against the Fuso. Right, and of course, continuing these ships that I expect to do well, I actually expect the Mutsu to do quite well, simply because it has such ridiculous gun power. And one of the weaknesses of the Mutsu is in fact the squishiness. But once again, with the very heavy smoke meta that I see coming, squishiness is not going to be as big of a problem as sheer gun power. And these 410mm guns can pretty much punch through anything. And that means a lot of power and a lot of devastating strike power. And for that same reason, the Bayern is, I think, going to be a very good all-round ship. The Bayern is also, is this fully upgraded? Yeah, no, it's not. So the Bayern does 25 knots. So it's among these, it's one of the fastest. The Mutsu is very fast at 27.8. Is this with a flag? It must be with a flag. Yeah, that's what I thought. The Mutsu is very fast though, and the Bayern is faster than pretty much everyone else except for it, and I expect it to do very well as well. It does have as well the 40mm deck here, which means reduction from IFHE damage on the bow, and here is the usual 25mm though. And it has good anti-air when you spec for it. Manual AA Bayern tends to shred tons of planes, because, well, you see the benefits. 100 DPS, you add manual AA, it becomes quite a monster, and it handles great as well. And more importantly, it has 380mm guns, which means it can overmatch pretty much any bow that you will face. The issue, of course, is that it's not nearly as accurate as the Warspite. It is a German battleship, but in return it does have a very strong turtleback, and it has good anti-air, which means it's the Bayern is going to be a great all-round ship, and especially if you get the Brawl, the Bayern will have a chance to shine. Now the two battleships that I don't expect to do as well, we'll start off, of course, with the New Mexico. It's going to be, in my opinion, pretty much worse than the Arizona in every way, and that's simply because the gun accuracy is so much worse. If I remember correctly, the Arizona has a sigma of 1.8, New Mexico has a sigma of 1.5. It does have 12 guns, just like the Fuso, but the difference is these main guns have a 34.2 second reload, whereas Fuso has 28. So the New Mexico lacks the same ability to pump out that ridiculous amount of shells that the Fuso can, and that's of course what I consider the downfall. It does have some good values like good anti-air, but it is painfully slow at 21 knots. Quite good stealth. Note this is with a captain slotted, of course, with concealment expert. It is fairly tanky, but the slowness and the inaccurate guns means that, well, in a smoke it will not be as powerful as these others, and in the open it will be very vulnerable. And 25mm armor all over means, of course, IFHE will feast happily on this ship. The reason I mention IFHE a lot is, of course, because it's going to be a key skill in tier 6 ranked cruiser play. And finally, we have the Dunkirk. Once again, I'm just showing the armor, how thin it is everywhere. Dunkirk is everyone's favorite HE target for this reason. You can pretty much hit anywhere and you will pen and you will do a lot of damage. Why do I think... Once again, as I said, I don't think there's such a thing as a bad tier 6 battleship, but the Dunkirk is going to be in the lower rate here. Once again, because one of the main strengths of the Dunkirk is the maneuverability. 29.5 knots, that's very fast, it's the fastest of all of these, and this is usually in random battles, this can be a pretty good advantage, but because I expect this heavy smoke camp meta, one of the greatest strengths the Dunkirk has, which is basically moving around and being agile on the battlefield, completely goes out the window. So it's going to be a lot of smoke camping. Now, the good thing is that it's going to be able to angle nose in like this in the smokes, which means that DDs who will probably constantly be torping these smokes are going to have a hard time hitting it. The downside is, of course, that the torpedo belt is pretty damn weak on it, but then again, no one really has that good of a torpedo belt, I think, except the Arizona had a really good one, if I remember, yeah, 39%. But other than that, the differences aren't large. The biggest issue this ship has is that it's squishy, and the main guns, even though they have actually really good penetration, the damage is underwhelming. 9.7k for a Citadel. You only have 8 guns. The Sigma is only 1.7, which puts it quite below, for example, Warspite's 2.0 Sigma. And 28-second reload, which is pretty much the same as Fuso's. The difference, of course, is that Fuso has bigger caliber, and Fuso can spam 12 shells instead of 8 every 28 seconds. So you can see Fuso does more damage per shell, and it shoots 4 shells more per volley. It has worse Sigma though, but you understand, especially in a smoke camping meta, while this won't be as valuable. Now, before these ranks where sitting in smoke becomes prevalent, the Dunkirk would probably do quite well, especially because, well, it can just angle and tank other battleships. For everyone except Warspite, Bayern, Mutsu. It can tank quite easily. But those 3 battleships, if you face Mutsu's, Bayern and Warspite, then you can't really angle because your nose gets overmatched by those shells. You can try to angle like this, basically try to get them to shoot your broadside, but if the enemy battleships know what they're doing, they can just shoot your turrets or your nose and you will suffer heavy damage. So ultimately, the Dunkirk and the New Mexico are my 2 ships. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad tier 6 battleship, but those 2 are definitely going to go into my section for this season. Anyway, let's move on to the cruisers. Right, starting off with the cruisers, I'll start with one of my personal favorites, which of course is the Cleveland. Now, you saw me show all those armor weaknesses on the battleships, and of course this means that a lot of these cruisers, when you spec IFHE, they deal a ton of damage to these very vulnerable battleships, especially the slow ones. Now, with the smoke meta that I expect to develop on the higher tiers of rank, that is, I expect there to be less opportunities, but the Cleveland will always have a place to shine. I think the ability to launch these shells above islands, the ability to hide behind islands, and in general the insanely good anti-air on this ship combined with the pure firepower and the pretty damn good health pool means that the Cleveland will have a place at any tier in ranked and will do extremely well, I would presume. Now, Other ships that will probably do well, because of the presumed smoke meta, the Leander will no doubt have a good opportunity to shine. Now, keep in mind, this isn't going to be as strong as the Fiji. The Fiji is borderline overpowered at tier 7, and that's because the Fiji has 12 guns. It's kind of like a Leander, except a ton better. It gains a huge amount of health. I mean, the Leander sits at 28k, and then we get to the Fiji and it jumps up to 31k. Okay, it's not that big, but the big difference is this one. 7.5 second reload on these 152mm guns. We go back to the Leander, 7.5 second reload, but only 8 guns. So the Fiji has a 50% more gun power. And that's really the big difference. A smoked up Fiji was a real nightmare at tier 7, but a smoked up Leander isn't going to be nearly as dangerous. Upgraded torps, you do get 8 km range, so it's good, but it's unlikely that you're going to be reaching the enemy smoke that consistently. You can get some pretty decent concealment on this one, I think like an 8.9 or something similar, which is quite good. But ultimately, it's not going to be as good as the Fiji. It will do well, but it's not going to be a definitive go-to ship like the Fiji was. The reason it will do well is, of course, you have smoke, you have hydro, you have heal. These are all going to be extremely valuable tools in the smoke meta. You can smoke up yourself and your teammates, you can spot incoming torps, and you can heal yourself in case you do take damage. So a solid, strong ship that will no doubt do well and will probably be seen all the way to rank 1, but not a definitive choice like the Fiji was. And the next one we can pick is probably the Budionni. Let me see, do I have a Budionni? I do. Wait, really? Yeah, there we go. Of course I have a Budionni. Come on, man. The Budionni, decently fast, decently good concealment. AA, not that good. I mean, it's kind of, you can defend yourself, but really nothing special. Torps, nothing special, but the main tool here is absolutely the main guns. 950 meter per second rail guns, 8 second reload, 16.6 km range. You can ducka across the map with this thing, and you add in IFHE to these 152mm guns, and you can burn down anything. You switch to AP because of the great shell velocity. You can punish broadsides extremely strongly as well. Budionni has often been lauded as one of the strongest tier 6 cruisers, and that's for a very good reason. It also has very good armor, especially when you angle, so you are unlikely to get Citadel as long as you don't go full nose in or full broadside. Even full broadside though, Budionni is known for its pretty damn trollish armor, and well, even though the Citadel is large, for some reason people tend to struggle to hit it, for a good reason, because well, it feels kind of trollish even. So overall, the Budionni is no doubt going to be seen at, I think, every tier of ranked. It's a great ship in every way. And yeah, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be used. It doesn't have quite as much firepower as the Cleveland, but it makes up for it with railguns and better range. And since we are covering this one, I might as well cover the Grass. Where is the Grass? The Grass is kind of, since I just covered the Budionni and the Cleveland, the Grass is kind of like a hybrid between these two. Better torps, debatably, yeah, I'd say better anti-air. But overall, it doesn't have quite the railguns of the Budionni, and it doesn't have quite the range of the Budionni. But in return, it has very consistent damage, very good speed. 35.2. You add in the boost. Wow, I'm misclicking a lot. There we go. You add in the speed boost on top. This is a very agile, very mobile ship. And it's kind of like a hybrid between the Cleveland and the Budionni, and this ship will probably be a pretty damn good flanker. Because of its speed, I can expect this one to be one of those ships that can actually do quite well outside of a smoke, like the Mayoko did at tier 7. So when everyone is in a blob in a smoke here, you can like sail around the flanks with the Degrasse and just harass them from long range. And that's kind of the same role I expect the La Galissonière to be able to do as well, since it shares very much the same strengths. So these 5 cruisers are the ones that I expect to do very well in ranked, and expect to see all the way until rank 1. Now, for those less, well, I mean, honestly less strong, I would probably pick the Molotov. Great guns, absolutely great guns. The problem is, pretty much the entire strength of the Molotov relies on these guns, and other than that, it has a lot of weaknesses. The weaknesses include health pool, quite low, and more importantly, a huge, very easy to hit citadel with not enough armor really to protect it. Even DDs can consistently citadel this thing. And the biggest issue is the turning circle is absolute garbage at 860 meters. It doesn't have the incredible range of any of the French ships or the Budionni 15.5, and honestly, if you get hit in this thing, you tend to take a lot of damage. That doesn't mean it's a bad ship, don't get me wrong, I'm just pointing out the weakness. This is the bad ship and you can probably make it work. I just don't consider it to be as good as these others, especially since the reload is 12.5, and now 180mm guns benefit from IFHE, so only if you don't get to use your AP, you're kind of stuck spamming HE, and if you're stuck spamming HE, you would be better off using one of these ships that deal pretty much 50% more DPM than this one does because of this very slow reload. So, an okay ship, but I don't expect it to perform as well as these others. Moving on, we got the Duca. I actually really like the Duca. I think the Duca is an amazing ship. The issue is that the Duca is a fantastic anti-cruiser ship, and it likes fighting them in the open. The Duca has garbage DPM, 8 guns and low HE damage with very low fire chance. It's one of the worst ships in the game when it comes to dealing with battleships, and I expect to see a lot of battleships. So the Duca will simply struggle. I mean, you can once again do some sort of flanking maneuvers, but I simply don't expect it to have that large of an impact unless someone goes around giving full broadside to it. I love the Duca for randoms, but I don't think the Duca is going to be that good in ranked simply because it lacks DPM, which means that unless people literally spoon feed you damage, you're going to struggle dealing it. Also, 14 km range, I mean, you can pop your spotter plane, but ultimately it is very limiting. The torps will be good, and the speed is fantastic, the concealment is great, but it comes down to sheer damage, and that's something the Duca quite straight up lacks. And Ayoba, the problem with the Ayoba is the lack of DPM, really. This is the IFHE season, no doubt, and if you get to use your AP volleys on broadsides, that's fantastic, but I simply don't see it happening too often. Range 14.9, it's okay, but this is a large floating citadel, this ship as well. Once again, I don't think the Ayoba will do badly, but I don't think it's a particularly strong choice, and it's so very easy to citadel this ship, and you have to give a lot of broadside to use the guns on this ship, so I don't see it being as strong as the other ones that I mentioned earlier. And finally, Nürnberg, and I guess Makarov. Makarov is basically a copy-paste of the Nürnberg. Now the Nürnberg, I recently featured a commentary on this ship. This ship has benefited greatly from the patch that gives it 360-degree turret traverse, and the new HE pen, which basically means it has built-in IFHE. The issue is still, though, the HE alpha is very low, but the biggest issue the Nürnberg has is that it's a goddamn floating citadel. I mean, look, are you serious? 50mm armor? Like, DDs will easily citadel this thing. I know, because I've citadeled them multiple times. DDs can easily citadel a Nürnberg. Everything citadels you. You have a good range, but I mean, people are just gonna take pot shots at you. When I see a Nürnberg in ranked, I'll just constantly shoot at it with my battleship. Eventually I'll get a hit, it doesn't matter from which angle, and it will most likely be a citadel. So the Nürnberg is going to struggle staying alive in ranked, and staying alive as a cruiser is one of the priority roles in ranked, which is why I think this one and the Makarov will both struggle quite heavily, since the Makarov is pretty much copy pasta of the Nürnberg. Now, other ships that I don't expect to do well, Graf Spee. Graf Spee. Same thing with the SF Admiral Graf Spee. But it's still a work in progress, but it's pretty much copy pasta. It lacks DPM. It's very tanky in health pool wise, and it's got that heal and survivability, which means that the ship will probably do, once again, I'm not saying these ships will do badly, it will probably do quite well. The problem is this massive reload. You see a DD, well, you get like one chance to shoot and if you happen to have the wrong ammo type loaded, well, hope you get pens with AP. I mean, well, honestly, AP was probably going to be the best choice against DDs because of how broken the pens are. And the guns, the velocity is good, the range is good, and it's very, very tanky, but it straight up lacks damage, and that's fundamentally one of the issues it's going to have. It straight up lacks damage, and it's not really good at dealing with battleships, and I expect to see a lot of battleships this season, because, well, yeah, you can shoot HE, but I mean, seriously, shooting 6 guns of HE that deals 3.2k each is not really that impressive. It has some of the lowest DPM, so once again, before the smoke meta kicks in, probably will do well. Once it kicks in, it's going to lack a lot of DPM, and it might survive until the end of the game though, and make up for the lack of DPM in that way by constantly dealing damage, but I still don't think it will do as well as the other choices. Now, there is one more ship, the Perth, and the reason why I don't consider the Perth will do well is, first of all, the smoke. When you pop the smoke on the Perth, it goes on. You have to wait out for the full smoke duration before it goes on cooldown, meaning you have these pretty much 2-minute gaps between when you can use the smoke and when you can't. And also the Perth has a range of 12.8 km, which means that its range is extremely anemic. You need your spotter plane just to be able to deal damage at any point, and you don't really want to be sailing around that close in the Perth. So the Perth is also a ship that is going to be struggling a lot in this ranked season. Anyway, that was my cruiser. That was all the cruisers covered. I might as well feature the carriers while I'm at it. No need to edit that part out. Let's see, cruisers. The issue with the cruisers here, well, I only have the Ruyu. There's not any super overpowered cruiser like there was, for example, the Saipan, but ultimately the Ruyu is obviously going to be a lot better than the Independence. Let's see if I can find the Independence here. Here we go, Independence. It's obviously going to be better. I mean, what setup could you even run that would be decent? You don't really have any decent set. Like 111 is first of all probably going to be the strongest Independence setup, as that will allow you to put some sort of fight up against the Ruyu, who will probably be running the 122 spec, this one. The other specs are pretty damn pointless. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess you could run AS, but it's probably not worth it, because the 122 you actually have pretty damn good striking power with 2 torpedo bombers and 2 bombers. Ultimately though, I don't really expect to see much carrier influence this season, because everyone and their sister is probably going to bring out these cruisers like the Cleveland, or I expect to see a lot of Clevelands this ranked season, because it's such an all-round great cruiser. So a Cleveland is a massive anti-air bubble that no carrier can go near. That thing shreds tier 8 planes, so poor tier 6 planes really have no chance. I mean, at ranks before the smoke beta and all the smoke camping becomes prevalent, I think a Ruyu can do quite okay. I mean, there's probably going to be a lot of battleships splitting up and sailing off on their own, and those are easy to kill and get some points for your team. But in the high tiers of ranked, I struggle to see these tier 6 planes survive and have that much of an impact. Finally, of course, we have the destroyers, the tier 6 destroyers. Now, let's start off with one a lot of people have been speculating that will be quite good, and that's of course the Shinonome. And I expect the ship to do quite well. It's got, you can reach quite a good concealment on this one, 6.1 km, which is almost the best you can reach at tier 6. Only the Hatsuharu beats it. So the Shinonome is going to be a very strong boat. It only has, the downside it has, it's only 8 km torps. But on the flip side, it can launch 9 of them, and they are quite fast, and the torpedo reload isn't that bad. But ultimately the reason why the ship is probably going to do quite well is because it's such a strong hybrid type of ship, and by hybrid I mean the fact that it has 3x2 guns, which means it actually has the most powerful alpha. Alpha means when you shoot all your guns at once and you deal damage, well, all of them hit. The reload is terrible, 9 seconds, but most of the time when DDs run into each other in ranked, they pretty much both fire one volley and then they turn around and flee and try to disengage. And in these situations, played correctly, the Shinonome is kind of going to be like the old Shimakaze guns, and a full broadside deals 10.8k alpha damage, and this is a lot more than any other ship. any other ship that can, I mean, even a Farragut full broadside is something like, I think Farragut B hull is something like 9,000. So you understand that the 10.8k potential volley with all these guns hitting is a lot. So this ship has the combination of pretty good health pool, really good guns, good torps, good maneuverability, handles very well, good rudder shift and all of this, and good concealment. So there's no reason why the Shinonome wouldn't be absolutely one of the better performing ships that we'll see. On that sense, I actually think that the Fubuki will also be kind of a dark horse. A lot of people have been underrating the Fubuki this season, but I think the Fubuki is going to be very strong. There's multiple reasons for this. First of all, you can reach the same concealment as the Shinonome. And second of all, you have the same health. You lack one turret. Okay, so that obviously means that you're instantly down pretty much a third of this alpha that I spoke of. But you make up for it more than enough by having 9 torps with 10 km range. That means you got to remember there's no radar this season. So there's going to be a lot of smoke camping, especially in the high tiers. And having this 9 torpedo volley that you can launch into the smokes is going to be massive, especially because you have this 10 km range, which means you can stay at a significantly safer distance than the Shinonome, who has to come much closer. I mean, this kind of applies to a lot of these torp boats, the Shinonome, the Anshan, the Ernst Gaede, all of these have 8 km torp ranges, so they have to come to you, whereas you can sit fairly close to your own ships and torp. And when the enemy ships come to you, when you spot them, you kind of spot each other, you are sitting closer to your fleet, which means you will get more backup from your friendlies than the enemy team will get. And because of this correlation between torpedo range and your own positioning on the map, I expect the Fubuki to do extremely well in this upcoming ranked, and it's absolutely one of my picks, just like the Shinonome is. Now, following up with strong picks for this, I'm going over the strong picks first. The Anshan, absolutely, this ship is going to do well. The Anshan has just slightly worse concealment. Those two Fubuki and Shinonome could reach 6.1. Anshan can reach 6.3, and it's stupidly fast. The AA is garbage, of course. It handles very well, but the stupidly fast speed means that it's actually quite a lot harder to dodge these torps, because of course fast ships tend to glide a fair amount. You can have a ton of health. This is with survivability expert, of course, but still 16.5k health, and most importantly, you have absolutely great guns. 11.9 km range guns without AFT, and one alpha broadside that I spoke of earlier does 7.6k, but you got a 5-second reload on these. The biggest downside is the turret reverse, but with expert marksman you get it down to 21.2, and if you have your guns turned and with this shell velocity of 870, you can pretty much shred any other DD in a gunfight. US DDs you have to kite away from, since you don't want to get close to a Farragut, because of course close up his DPM will shred you, but the Anshan is going to do, in my opinion, pretty damn greatly, especially because you have 8 km torps as well. So you basically have the same torps as the Shinonome, you just have one less, 2x3 instead of 3x3, and 8 km range, 60 knots, and they hit pretty damn hard at 14.4. So the Anshan is going to be a great hybrid ship, and the Anshan is no doubt going to do extremely well this ranked season. Another pick following up good ships that I expect to do very well is of course the Gallant. Do I still have it? Yes, I still have it. Nice. The Gallant is of course a work in progress, but you have seen my commentary on this ship. Handles great, very fast, detectability of 6 km. This is better than Shinonomes and Fubukis, and it also has 2x4 torps. Now, the difference is that the reload is significantly longer. Anshan can launch, 76 seconds, and Fubuki and these can launch every 73 seconds. This one has a 96 seconds, so very long torpedo reload. But these ships are insanely stealthy. 1.3 km torpedo detectability, huge damage, 15.4. So the times when you actually want to launch these torps, you will probably get more value out of them, as long as they aren't hydroed. And the guns are great. 14.4 second turret traverse, that's pretty much USDD turret traverse, 5-second reloads, same as Anshan's. You don't have quite the AP capacity of the Anshan who can Citadel cruisers, you struggle to do that in the Gallant, but DD versus DD fights, even though the HE does deal less damage, this one is a fantastic hybrid as well. You also don't quite have the same health pool, but you got the concealment, you got the speed, and just like the Anshan, I expect the Gallant to do extremely well this season. Now those are the hybrid ships. The ships that I expect to really shine this season. Then we got ships that will probably do okay in the higher tier, and that's Farragut. Now first you think, what? Farragut? Are you serious? Only 6.4 km torps, you can't even stealth torp in this thing, like what do you expect to be doing in this thing? Well, first of all, under concealment, 6.6, that's not really that good. The speed, however, is pretty damn good. And more importantly, among all the health, not really that good. It's like one of the lowest, in fact the lowest health pool of them all. So your first, I understand the first feeling is, what the hell, this ship won't do that well. And I think actually before rank 10 and so, this ship probably will not perform that well. But once we get to 10 to 5 and 5 to 1, where the smoke meta will start becoming prevalent, this is of course the ace in the sleeve of the Farragut. And this is what will make it so very strong. US smokes, the only ship that has US smokes. Now why is this a big deal? Well, this smoke screen lasts 118 seconds with a reload of 160 and is active for 26 seconds. And then we look at something like the Anshan smoke and we realize it lasts 81 seconds. So that's almost 40 seconds less. That's the Farragut smoke lasts almost 50% longer. It also deploys for a longer time. And if there's few DDs in the game, well, having a Farragut on your team smoking up your battleships is going to be such a massive tool, or smoking up your cruisers. Basically, you can smoke up your entire team. That's what very often happens in higher tier ranked. And the Farragut is going to be the absolute king of smoking up your teammates. It's going to lack in torpedoes, survivability, concealment, but this smoke alone is what will still make it a very strong, it's kind of a game-winning ship in that sense, that it probably won't individually have a huge impact in terms of kills, damage, whatever, contesting cap points, but the smoke it will bring, good smokes are going to have such a huge impact in the very much predictable Vape Nation meta that we expect to see. So that's the reason why the Farragut still rates pretty highly on my list. Then we have Gaede. I mean, ultimately, what is good about the Gaede? Well, actually, what is bad? Let's start with the bad things first. The guns have abysmal HE alpha. It doesn't really matter which gun you go for. The HE alpha is still going to be very underwhelming, and even ultimately the AP is always going to be the strongest point of the Gaede, and you are going to struggle to get consistent results out of AP because, well, you're fighting a lot of DDs, probably the most in this ship. The concealment is also the worst. You can reach 6.6, which is the same as Farragut, which is among the worst, which means ships like Shinonome, Fubuki, even Gnevny are all going to outspot you by 500 meters, and because all these DDs are roughly the same speed, you're not really going to be able to catch them as you would want to with your Hydra. They can just sail away and keep you spotted quite easily, in fact. The torps are okay. Torps are okay, 2x4, the same, and 8 km range. That's pretty nice. In fact, these are pretty much identical to the Gallant's torps, but they also share the weakness of the Gallant's torps, and that's the massive reload. A 90-second reload on the torps compared to all these other ships that have 8 torps and can reload significantly faster. So that is, of course, not that good. And yeah, you have Hydro. That's great and all, but how are you actually going to... The only time you'll be able to really use Hydro is defensively, because you don't want to push in this thing and try to like fight push into the enemy smoke, like seriously, with a 4 km distance on your Hydro. If you get spotted, you get slaughtered, and you're not going to get away with 690 meter turning circle, and it's a very large ship as well, the Gaede. It's a very sizable destroyer. So, and of course you have the worst smokes, the absolute worst. If you thought the Anshan's 80-second smoke was bad, this one has a 61-second smoke. So, by far the worst smoke as well. So the Gaede is not going to be a good performer this season. I don't really see it performing that well at all. It has too many weaknesses and not enough strengths to back it up. So, this is gonna be much more of a bottom tier pick, but it's still not the worst. If you go straight up the worst picks for this season in terms of DDs, I have to go Hatsuharu has to take one of those spots. Hatsuharu has one single strength, and compared to all the others, and that's 5.8 km concealment. You can reach 5.8, which is better than all the others. Shinonome Fubuki sit at 6.1, so that's the advantage. The problem is, whereas the Fubuki has 3x3 torps, this one has 2x3. So you give up one entire set of 3 torps, and same thing with the, compared to the Shinonome, and you don't really have the gunpowder either. I mean, your HE Alpha is 7.2. I mean, what's the B hull? No, that's actually with the A hull. If you go B hull, which you need to do to get these torps, the 10 km torps, the A hull has, you lose the additional turret, so basically you only have 2x2. So you have, this is basically a Fubuki with one less torp tube and slightly better concealment. But to get that slightly better concealment, you also give up 1.2k health. The Fubuki has 12.9, this one has 11.7. So this ship feels like a straight up downgrade, and that's why I don't really see any point in using it. It's a straight up downgrade. It's just straight up worse than the Fubuki, and no real point. The small concealment advantage does not make up for all the torpedo power you lose, because the Fubuki, just like the Atsuharu, rely heavily on these because they only have 2x2 turrets, which means the gun power is going to be extremely underwhelming. And the other bad performer is the Gnevny. And the Gnevny can actually get surprisingly good concealment at 6.1. And it does come quite tanky. We can mount the hull, 14.1. But the issue is, of course, you won't be able to torp anything, so you are purely a gunboat. With 4 km torps, you won't be able to torp anything at all. You are purely a gunboat, kind of like the Farragut, but you don't have the nice US smokes to back you up. And ultimately, why would you play this one when you could play the Anshan or the Gallant, or hell, probably even Shinonome in this case, because at least, yes, you have guns, and yes, they do decent damage, 5-second reload, but they have terrible turret traverse, and yeah, there's not enough positives for this ship. It's got good health, good speed, and good concealment, but it completely lacks in the torpedo department. It lacks in the smoke department, so the only thing it really has going for it is gunpowder, but at tier 6 the gunpowder really isn't that significant. Higher tier Soviet DDs, they get enough gunpowder to compensate for the lack of torps, but the Gnevny really doesn't. In random battles it works fine because you can just sit in the back and ducka all day, but in ranked that's not really the case, and the Gnevny will pretty much suffer quite significantly in ranked. Anyway, that was my, holy crap, this thing ended up being massively long. That was my tier 6 ranked preview of what I expect to see. Sadly, there is of course a lot of speculation, and I cannot say that this is absolutely how it's going to be guaranteed. I can only give you guys my opinion of what I expect to see. People will disagree, as they always do, but I mean, it is my opinion, so you are more than welcome to disagree with it. That's fine. I simply gave my reasoning as to why I think certain things will happen and as to why I don't think certain other things will happen. Whether or not it turns out to be true, we will see. But I still hope you guys got something out of this extremely long commentary. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later.